is from your underscore grandmother 123. I met someone at work who didn't seem human. It's a quality post. Quality. I'm 16 and I work at the local grocery store. I've had the job for about a year now. Since I'm still in high school, I don't work during the day. I usually get scheduled for 3 weekday shifts, mostly closing from 6 to 10. This past Wednesday seemed like a normal night. It was around 9, maybe 9:30, and I was just waiting for my shift to end. I was up near the front of the store restocking cans when I noticed a man walk in. I'm not great at guessing ages, but he looked like he was around 40. He was average height, maybe 5'10", and had this really pale skin, like he hadn't been outside in a long time. His clothes didn't look dirty or anything, but they felt off, almost like they didn't quite fit, like he had put on someone else's outfit. It was a plain gray hoodie and black jeans, but the hoodie sat too tight around the neck, and the sleeves were too short. What caught my attention was the way he moved. He looked stiff, like inhumanly stiff. He was walking as if he didn't have any joints, kind of like rigid and unnatural. His arms hung straight at his sides, barely swinging, and his feet hit the floor hard with every step. It creeped me out a little, but I ignored it and kept working. A few minutes later, I finished, and my manager told me to restock some more things near the back of the store. So I grabbed the cart and headed back. And then the man appeared again. Same strange walk. He looked like he was searching for something, but had no idea what it was. When he noticed me, he walked over and asked where the soda was. His voice was haunting, cold, flat, like there was no emotion behind it. It made me feel uneasy. Up close, his face looked wrong, not scary, just wrong. His skin was smooth in a way that didn't look natural, almost plastic. His eyes were sunken, but not in a tired way. They just looked hollow. And the weirdest part was how he blinked. It was slow, like someone acted out what blinking was supposed to look like. I told him what aisle it was in, and then he did something that really freaked me out. He repeated my exact sentence word for word, then said, "Thank you." That might not sound super weird, but in the moment it felt off. I finished up and went back to my manager and looked around for the guy, but I couldn't find him anywhere. He must have left. I asked my manager if she had seen him, and she said no. I asked the cashier later, and he said she had noticed his weird talk, but he hadn't bought anything. I went home and tried to forget about it, but I had trouble sleeping. I kept thinking about his face. It was uncanny, like a copy of a real person. It just didn't feel right. It's been a few days and I still can't get his face or the way he walked out of my mind. That would be pretty creepy, I think. Some people said a lot of what you described sounds like fentanyl addict. And someone was like, yeah, my first thought was drugs. But other people were like, how exactly? Some people who are addicts, who was an addict before, said 100% yes. The description with weird movements and dead eyes and walking around in a stupor sounds like a ton of people he used to associate with. a soda at 10 p.m. Someone else said, I'm not saying you saw an alien, but ... A human-alien hybrid. Someone heavy on drugs. Maybe that's just a homeless person, an addict. And someone was saying it is kind of concerning the way you're describing this person and dehumanizing them. I'm guessing you don't live in a highly populated area because this is a daily sight/reality where I live. That's too bad. People with broken limbs who never got treated at a hospital, the bones will regrow abnormally and can deform them permanently, which would explain the strange stiff movements. Oh, that's horrible. I have to admit that I don't come into contact with a lot of, or even like I don't see a lot of people like this either. I've never lived in a big city. It's really sad, the paleness and uncanny features. People do drugs and sleep outside long enough, you will see their facial features change dramatically. I recently saw a man with his eyes both swollen shut and his whole face was distorted. Paleness is common from dehydration, malnutrition, and drug use. And then someone in response to that was like, please take into consideration the OP's age. His intent was not to dehumanize, just an experience. He's just a boy, hasn't been used to seeing misery much yet. But then the person who originally commented was like, yeah, that's true, but it's also important that we educate and correct our youth so these kinds of assumptions don't happen. They're getting kind of testy on here. Defensive. Someone's like, okay, yeah, but you don't have to attack the kid. And then that poster was like, who are you to tell me whether I'm attacking someone or not? I was not. And I said, it's kind of concerning. It's not a 5-year-old, it's a 16-year-old. And then the person was like, don't get defensive. You had good intentions, but your execution falls flat. When you passively aggressively attack people who tell you that maybe the kid isn't being rude, just inexperience. Yes, he's 2 years away from being 18, but you are hardly mature enough at that age. And some people keep learning well into their 50s. I think we should all keep learning throughout our whole life. There's always something new to learn and experience. I feel like we haven't experienced anything. There's very few people who have experienced everything that the world has to offer and experience every bad situation or different cultures, just there's always something new to learn. So anyway, that got kind of heated. It didn't need to be heated. It was just this poor kid who had a bad experience. Anxiety inducing. Be kind to yourself. Settle that one under very unsettling. It could also be a socially awkward, neurodiverse person or someone with a physical disability. Yeah, I think that was some of these other comments are getting to the point of hey, it's different, but it could, it's kind of reality for some people to see these and to be in that situation. But you don't have to attack the person who hasn't ever experienced something like that. Wow, there's a lot of comments. I'm not gonna go person syndrome. It also affects cognition, which is why he repeated what you told him. There's a lot of like, wow, there's even more comments. Okay. Alright, we'll keep going. We don't need to keep reading about that. Okay, let's see. Okay, this is cool. I mean, this is not cool, but it's interesting thinking. I watched my coworker get arrested and then found out he had a sinister plan for me. It's true scary certified. This is by the user I wanna take a nap 94. Relatable. I watched my coworker get arrested and then found out he had a sinister plan for me. I worked with this man for a little over 3 years. We worked pretty closely on some projects over the last 2 years and even sat near one another at work. In September, I showed up and saw about 10 detectives at my place of work. I was a bit startled, as this was quite unusual for my area. I looked around and saw that my coworker was in handcuffs and looked quite disheveled, which wasn't out of the norm, to be honest. I walked up to the detectives, introduced myself, and let them know who I was in relation to him. I asked what was going on, and they filled me in on why he was currently being arrested. For the sake of the case, I won't share more than he was a disgusting person. Over the course of the next 3 hours, I watched as they dismantled his workstation, went through his belongings, took evidence pictures, and so on. I was pulled in and out of rooms, answering questions about his character, what I knew of him, and my feelings about him as a person. I told them he gave me weird feelings in my gut, that I've always told my husband I wouldn't be surprised if the cops ever did come looking for him. That my husband even thought he was weird, and if I ever went missing, that he'd be the first person to be suspected. Wow. Didn't realize how real this almost was, in parentheses. The detective on site told me that they served a search warrant of his home and were looking there for any evidence. It sounds like they found more than they anticipated and were looking to see if there was anything else unrelated to what they were currently investigating. I was asked my name and my husband's name for confirmation for something they found, which I did think was odd, but I let it go and called my husband to update him on the happenings of the day thus far. However, the last hour I was pulled in for the final time and advised by one of the lead detectives, who couldn't even look at me, that I needed to ensure I was safe and protected in the event they didn't book him that day. Come to find out, he had been journaling about me over the course of at least a year. Oh my god. Saying he wanted to be with me, but the problem was that I was married. His journal then lined out a plan to set my husband up for cheating on me, and the end result in my death, caused by him, my coworker. The officer said that everything in between was more vile than he's ever heard, to the point he was crying when he was telling me to make sure I was safe. Oh my, crying, a detective, and didn't want to scare me. Thankfully he was charged and is looking at a long time in prison. But I still think about it. It keeps me up at night. It just shows you never really know someone, even your coworkers. Oh my god. I don't even have words. I don't have words for that. That's so creepy. I'm just like imagining finding out someone that you like, yeah, he maybe gives you the creeps or like is kind of off, but he's like in your life, and you would honestly, like even someone you don't really like or is like, he's kind of weird or creepy, sometimes it feels like something like that could never happen to you. But that's so scary. Oh my gosh. Some people were asking what led the police to suspect he had done something to warrant the search. Some people were getting the impression he had images of children on his computer. And that being disgusting is the first thing that comes to mind. That is the most vile thing ever. Downloading like children's stuff and then filming and selling. Ew, horrible. Absolutely disgusting excuse for it. Oh my gosh. Someone said I've always wondered how many times I was an almost victim of stuff like this. It's the OP said it's the weirdest thing knowing when you were. I talked to my husband about wondering how long until the daily work interactions weren't enough. Like how long until he snapped. Wow. Okay, that's really creepy. Holy. Let's do this next one. Camping incident last year. It's spooky. I like spooky. Okay. This is by the user Gabagool 245. Gabagool. And that's like Gabagool, not like ghoul, as in like the spooky ghoul. So, me and my best friend tried to go camping once a year. We have been doing this since we were 13 years old. That's so cute. Never really been truly scared or had anything weird happen until last year in the Blue Ridge Mountains. We showed up during peak season the first night and space was very limited. We were losing light, so we set up camp on a spot on the side of the mountain. That was an absolute wind tunnel. Morning came, so we went into town, drank beers, and messed around until late afternoon. By the time we got back to the mountains to switch our camping spot, we were losing light again, but managed to find a more remote spot. We set up with our tents. We got the fire going and started drinking again. Time goes by. It's probably 1 a.m. when we saw a flashlight aimed at us, and then it started walking our way. And we didn't think much about it and assumed it was a park ranger coming to fuss at us about something, because who else walks up on you in a remote part of the mountains at 1 a.m.? Not even park rangers do that unless you're like causing big problems, I guess. I don't think I've ever had a park ranger do anything like that. Of course, I'm not like making any crazy. I'm not like being crazy when I'm camping, so I don't know about you, but ever since I started camping, I learned it's kind of an unspoken rule that you don't walk up on someone camping that late at night unless it's an emergency. Well, yeah. Anyways, the person gets close enough, and we realize it's just some guy, probably early 50s, in a shirt and basketball shorts, and his girl in his 40s, who was avoiding eye contact with us. Oh. The man immediately forces a conversation about nothing, doesn't acknowledge the time or his girl. His eyes were darting all over the place while we were talking to him about dumb shit like what model or style of lantern we had and how cool it was. He's saying weird stuff like how he used to be former law enforcement, completely out of context of the random conversation he's engaged us in, when all of a sudden he pretends to land his flashlight on our tents and says, "Oh, that's where you guys are sleeping, huh? Cool setup." The way his eyes and flashlight are moving gives us both the feeling that he's trying to see how many of us were there, and what we had on us or near us, because his eyes and flashlight kept scanning the ground around us. we're packing our shit and getting out of here. Good idea. So we did. This was the most unsettling thing I have ever had happen while camping. I think this guy was going to wait until we were asleep and come back. I just don't know for what. But I do know we were 100% getting sized up that night. Might not seem like much, but if you have ever had a moment with another human being who is sizing you up, you know what I'm talking about. Oh, I'm so glad that they left. I'm like tearing up because I'm like so freaked out. That's really scary. Okay, someone was like, always trust your gut. Glad you left. Someone said, another user said, that happened to me once in the Red River Gorge. I was with my boyfriend at the time. The area and the camp spot I knew well and would normally feel totally comfortable there. When we parked, there was a man parked nearby in a camper van. We heard him holler something to someone off in the woods but didn't think anything of it at the time. Like you, we were losing light fast and hurried to set up a camp. We started hunting down some wood to start a fire, and suddenly a man popped out of nowhere and seemed like he wanted to be friendly. As he watched us looking for dry wood to burn, he made a comment. That we wouldn't find much because he had been out collecting wood for several days, and then offered to sell us the wood that he had gathered and was stockpiling. What? Being friendly and like WTF. We offered to trade some eggs for some wood. He took us up to his campsite about 50 yards uphill. Earlier, he had mentioned being alone, but when we saw his campsite, we thought, no way. It was set up like he'd been living there for weeks. A portable picnic table, huge tent, lots of random stuff in the stockpile of wood, more things than just one person would ever need or could backpack in where we were. Then I remembered the man in the parking lot and the holler we heard. I had a major gut feeling that he wasn't alone. It also didn't help that guy said he liked to camp up high so he could see everything below, which of course included our campsite in clear view of where he was posted up at. My instinct did not like the situation at all. As soon as we got back to our site, we pretended we were settling in and started a fire, all while packing our shit up fast as possible. We hightailed it out there in the dark. Side note, the guy mentioned he'd come from my hometown and had been living in the woods near the homeless shelter prior. I used to work right next to those woods, and I know the characters that come in and out of there, usually on the run or something. Wow. That was also a creepy story. Several years ago, there was a young woman sailing through all the Great Lakes and blogging about her very cool adventures. One night, she was sleeping on her boat, and a man who had been tracking her broke in and, she finished the trip, but it was a big stain on Michigan. Ruined the objective of the trip. That's horrible. I had a story. This is my own scary story. It's kind of, it could have been a lot scarier. I went camping. I have to tell you guys, it's really very sad. set up a little bit closer to everyone because I did not want to be like on the outskirts. Surprisingly, I was able to do this and sleep in my own tent because growing up I was always really scared of camping at night. Even though I loved camping, like sleeping at night, I was always scared of like noises and animals and just being at night out in the middle of nowhere, you know. But anyway, so we set up our tents and we were all kind of like gathered close together because of the way the landscape was, and we were under brush in like you know, like it was like not a grove, but it was like a stand of juniper pine trees, juniper and pine. I don't remember exactly, but like suddenly there was it was like in the daytime, and this car comes crawling over to us, and it's like a few boys, like college age boys. We're all in college. This is all in college, so we're college and they're college. And they were chatting to us, asking what we were doing, and we were like, oh yeah, we're with this university, we're doing this study. And the PhD student who was there, that was her study, so she was talking a lot with them, and they're like, oh yeah, we're here with this school, and we are doing a study too. And then they were like joking around, and they're like, yeah, you guys should come, like, if you want to come hang out and party tonight, like, come on over. And we're all like, nah. Like, we don't know you guys. Plus this is a work trip, and we're doing like 10-hour days, so there was like no one wanted to go party. Everyone wanted to just like go to sleep. There were a few people who went like off-roading after work for like an hour, but other than that, nothing. We were just like hunkered down and going to sleep. I went to sleep really early because I didn't want to sleep after it was dark. I wanted to fall asleep before it was dark. Anyway, so that night, we all go to bed. I go to bed, I fall asleep, and suddenly we're all awoken, or I was awakened. I woke up to people running around in our campsite area, screaming and saying like, I'm naked, I'm naked, I'm naked. And he was just like running around her, like our tents, and no one said anything. No one. I was like freaking out. I was like, what are these guys doing? I of course immediately think like something, like, are they here to just prank us because they're drunk, or are they here to like lure us out? And like I was like, there's no way I was going to go out and or even speak. No one speaks. And finally he like stops and he was like, oh man, or something. Like, I don't know exactly. He walked off and then the car drove off. Anyway, I was up for forever after that. I was so scared, and I also had to pee, so of course I had to get out, and I was like so freaked out. Anyway, no one, I woke up in the morning, and it was so funny because no one spoke about it during breakfast until like, I don't remember if it was me, I think it was me. I was like, so last night, did anyone hear? And we all cracked up and we were like, yes. I think everyone was just like worried that we were all like hallucinating, or we were all, maybe like no one was awake because no one said anything. And so anyway, it was so funny. The PhD student was like in the car because she slept in the car sometimes because some of our equipment needed to be charged with the car battery, and she needed to switch it at night, and so she slept in the car, and she was like, yeah, Also spooky. It's called Creepy Hunting Encounter by Hot Dogger 2020. Some of these usernames are really funny. I once held a hunting lease in Middle Georgia. It was an abandoned hunting camp that hadn't been used in several years. I'm not superstitious at all, but this place was legitimately spooky. It was miles down an overgrown dirt road and completely surrounded by woods. It's probably the most secluded place I've ever been. I used to hunt there by myself a lot, and there was always this weird sense that I wasn't alone out there. There was a locked gate at the front of the property, but it was not uncommon for us to find the front door of the cabin open, even when the door was locked. That was pretty creepy, but that's not what the story's about. One evening, I was hunting down in a small valley by a food plot. We put lining a creek that bordered the property. From the minute I sat down, I had a weird feeling, like I wasn't in a safe place, even though I was holding a .308 with ballistic tipped rounds. I didn't feel like I was the top predator out there. I didn't see any deer while I was sitting in the stand, but the forest was abuzz with activity. Birds, squirrels, and other critters singing their normal evening symphony. And then all of a sudden, silence. Everything just dropped. It felt like everything in the woods was looking right at me. It was getting dark fast anyways, and I was extremely creeped out, so I packed up my gear and started to walk back up to the cabin. About 100 yards away, I had this feeling that something was coming up behind me. I spun around and pointed my rifle back down the path towards the food plot, and that's when I saw it. There was something standing in the middle of the path. It wasn't a person, but it looked like a deer. It wasn't a person, but it didn't look like a deer or anything I've ever seen before. There was hardly any light to make out any features, but oh my god. It almost looked like some kind of bipedal deer or something. It was just standing there staring at me. I quickly made my way back to the cabin, packed up my stuff, and got out of there. I just let the lease run out, never went back after that. Holy crap. Oh, someone says you should post this in Backwoods Creepy. Ooh, I should look into that. Another user said, like they say, some places on this earth just don't feel right. Ran into some decades back in a Louisiana swamp that just makes my blood run cold. You know something's off when the forest goes silent. I think I was right down the road from you, camping alone in the Oconee National Forest. I heard a dog bark off in the distance. The clock said 3 a.m. Then a second dog, then a third, and then more join in. A few minutes later, it all stops at once. The pack must have caught it. No, I could not fall back to sleep even after my hand was on my rifle. An hour later, there's something close to the tent. I poked my head out and less than 10 feet away, skunk. Got back in the tent and sat there till sunrise. Someone said it was just a curious forest spirit checking you out and seeing if you were significant. It must have decided you weren't. With the ballistic tip, even with those ballistic tipped rounds. So there is this thing that's called not a deer. Or someone says the deer lady. Or there's also those there's extensive body of folklore about supernatural fairy guardians of natural places. There's a someone who regularly drives those roads, and he said he saw something headed towards the reservoir there. There were two things he saw on different days. One was on all fours and hunchbacked, but with a cat-like face, and the other said it looked like a